right. Welcome back, folks. Acquire and operate, building a portfolio of micro SaaS companies, doing it in public, and we're doing it for the love of the game. Haha. Lou, how goes it, pal?
Doing amazing, man. This week has been such a heady week, really leading into it. But with the working sessions you and I have had, we got some pretty cool things that are snapping together right now. So I'm excited to dive into today's issue to really show people what part of our growth engine looks like.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, it's not documented, doesn't exist. So I guess in that spirit, the headline for today, so this is an operating concept, and it's a diagram of the growth engine we're using to generate 20% year over year growth. We'll go into what some of the like baseline assumptions are in terms of context, because for us, our portfolio company sells to small, mid-sized businesses. We have no sales-led kind of human tactics in the mix, so there are some caveats here. But ideally, you can step in here, duplicate the Figma template, fine tune it as you see fit, and away we go. And then I think, or others are just kind of configure it, customize it again, however you see fit. But ideally, this is meant to prevent you having to go 0 to 1. So operating concept, growth engine diagram, which is going to be a little bit of a flow chart, meets some detailing of the tech stack. I think the only thing to take it to the next level would be to include some KPIs along the way, but we're just kind of keeping it basic for now. So table of contents, what's coming? We'll dive into the resource concept itself. We'll give you a quick orientation, and then we'll talk through some applications. Am I missing anything?
No, I think you hit everything right there on the head. I would say, I wouldn't be building in public if we didn't show you our thought process in the beginning to then wrap up with KPIs a few months later once we actually have them. So excited for that next part of the journey.
No doubt. And I mean, you can only improve what you measure, but I think the first order of business is, and ideally this is a Dalio-ism, but ideally you want to visualize the machine. Like that's the holy grail. This is our business. And from a systems thinking perspective, it's a function of inputs, outputs, feedback loops, etc. So that's what we've got here. So let's pull her on up and we will jump into it. Let me see. This has always been a little weird. All right, let's try that. Okay.
I thought you were like the Riverside guru at this point.
It's actually, let me see. Does this get in the way? Yeah, okay, cool. Okay. So, and actually I'm going to keep you, actually, let me see if I minimize this a little bit. It gets funny. Does that make your window smaller? But that's okay. All right, so here we are. And I got my, anybody working in Figma, this thing is your best friend. Holy God. It's like this little touchpad that works like a charm because you can zoom in, you can zoom out. Whew, it's a lifesaver. So what we got here. So this is the thing. So let's kind of orient the audience and then we'll dive into it. So this is very much kind of a workflow diagram. And the assumption is that a user, an audience, a prospective user, an audience member is kind of working their way from left to right. The big events are kind of getting, or like, and kind of long form content here is the tip of the spear. So we're using long form content and short form content as that primary means to build an audience. And then we move in towards, kind of more action or input output related tactics like outbound, cold outbound in our case. And then we move our way, like the big moments here are trial sign up, get to the activation point, and then they become an evangelist. So generally speaking, we're moving left to right here. This is kind of the core of what we're talking about. And then we've made some distinctions around where you can add in your channels, and we've organized them some different, I guess, points of view on owned, earned, and paid, but it's an easy way to talk about shit, so we're going to stick with it. So we got owned, earned, and paid, and it wouldn't be dope nasty if there wasn't a very thoughtful section of tech stack here, Kev. So we'll lean on you to jump in there, but the tech stack, and this is meant to kind of line up laterally, right? So it's like, this is the tech stack component that plays here. These are the tech stack components that play here, and so on and so forth. Some quick definitions. So long form content is long. So it's not a tweet. It's not an Instagram post. It's not a Facebook post. I think you could argue that some stuff on LinkedIn is long form, but the bottom line, and actually let's just zoom in here. So we've got our long form content. Ideally, that feeds into your short form content. Right now, there's a lot of tooling available from a repurposing perspective. We've got evergreen. You want to basically use data and double down on the content that's ripping the hardest. So you want to recycle the short form. And obviously you don't want to just become the human that recycles every single day. You want to do it very selectively. And then these are loops. Oh God, that's very
Yeah,
important.
I was gonna say we want to add some more context to this. So in terms of like the long form content, you want to think about those Medium articles, those the LinkedIn articles, anything that takes you through a thought in depth, where you can structure a table of contents, and by the time you get to the end of the article, you feel like a much smarter person. You have a whole takeaway that you can go and apply in your life. That is long form. Now, when you look at these loops, the benefit of short form is you can generate as many short form posts as much as you want from long form. So, for example, if you have a long form post about, hey, how to implement a CRM, there's probably going to be 10 high level topics in that long form article. But for the short form portion, you can generate 3 to 5 posts for each one of those 10 topics and just automatically spit that out on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever. Any of those 3 posts that gets the best engagement, let's grab the one that has the best engagement, repurpose that one even more highly engaged or highly SEO charged short form posts. So that's kind of the flywheel that we're looking to generate. And that's the context that I would add to it.
Yeah, when I think like Gary V once upon a time, like content pyramids, there's a lot of different frameworks and ways to think about it, but it's basically like you take your
Yeah.
long thing and you splinter it into a bunch of smaller stuff so that you get more leverage from that individual piece of content.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess so we have kind of core concepts. So we spoke about left to right. We spoke about kind of distinguishing the transition from content, which includes call to actions. And then obviously we're using cold outbound, and we have lead magnets driving towards trial signups. You might have some paid ads rolling. You might have an ambassador underpaid. You might have an ambassador under earned. You obviously probably have a marketing site, a website, et cetera. But as you noted, the growth loops and loops, right? So I think you've got to to create a flywheel, you need some kind of reinforcing thing. What does reinforcing thing means? It means that an input in the system becomes an output, which can feed more inputs. Simple as that. And I know that's almost too simple to really comprehend. But for us, the assumption is when somebody subscribes to a newsletter, that feeds back into our long form audience. When a trial sign up reaches that brand promise, that aha moment, they're activated, they're evangelists, they become kind of word of mouth engines. Boom, that drives into trial sign up. So you want to be very, very thoughtful. Like, where are the loops? Because those are the things that you have to get right, because that will help you break out of linear growth. And also another core assumption is that the returns on a lot of traditional channels diminish over time. So the kind of notorious one is paid ads, where it's like,
Hmm.
ooh, we picked, these keywords for search ads. It's absolutely ripping. Oh shit. Now our competitive set is onto us. They're bidding up the cost of these words. Now it's not, these ads aren't profitable anymore. So the loops are what you hang your hat on. The other stuff is gravy, and the gravy faucet dries out over time. Okay, cool. So that was very useful context. So let's maybe step in now and just go through it. And I guess from the lens of the audience, right? Like, what you want to do is just kind of update this for your context first.
Yep.
Um, and
Always
then,
tailor. Never just take a template. Always tailor
yeah.
it to your use
Well, I mean,
cases.
if you're selling to SMB and it's mostly product-led growth, shit, you could make a copy and run, and you could go,
True.
honestly, but, or you can model your growth engine after this. Like, it's a pretty actionable thing, but you're probably going to want to configure and fine tune some stuff. So I guess if there was sales-led something, like presumably you have warm leads and cold leads that are generated. Warm leads are a function of people who have opted in. That's usually a content thing. Here, if you want this,
Hmm.
give us your email address. Cold is your scraping stuff. But if you do have a sales oriented thing, winning by design is your best friend. Jakob, God, love Jakob. He's like the most enthusiastic human on the planet. So you would have, once the lead has expressed an interest and they become opportunities, this whole thing here would be a sales process instead of like a product oriented, 2-week trial or a kind of a freemium model. So that's kind of the
Hmm.
first piece of context. The next one would be, do we have any long form content? Yes, we've got a blog, we've got a YouTube channel, we've got a podcast, whatever, Spotify podcast. Cool, update that, and you might even add in what the beats are. So our blog hits these 3 beats. Our video is basically us just talking about the blog out loud. So, and obviously, like Substack, like for Scaling Ventures, our Substack is our long form content. And then we repurpose that as a function of video by talking through it live. And then we splinter that into a bunch of short form content. So you have that. And then you want to just be thoughtful of like, what is your call to action of your audience? So we have our CTAs here, call to actions. And for us, it's subscribe to the newsletter or DM to receive a gated asset. And then from there, we have warm leads. And with the warm leads, we're via outbound drive, or we're like, and so now it's warm and they've expressed interest and kind of raised their hand, but only to the degree where they want to follow our shit. They haven't said, we want to trial your product. We want to use the thing.
There's no buying intent yet.
And lead magnets are the way to go. So it's like, give as much value as you possibly can for free. And then, you know, it's like give, ask, or, you know, as Hermodisi says, give until they ask, straight up. But Gary V, his whole thing was jab, right hook, which is basically give, ask. Yeah. You have something?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that's exactly it. You want to give as much value as possible away for free to create that buying intent with them without like explicitly saying, hey, you should buy this thing. You want to give, and then kind of subtly get to the ask. By that point, the hope is they're already kind of nurtured enough where they already want to go purchase something from you.
Totally. So we're taking our leads effectively, whether they're warm or cold, and we're driving them towards a lead magnet, which is just here's the most valuable thing we can possibly give you for free. And then ideally from there, we're generating conversions to trials. We have a trial nurture email drip, which is, and this was a little tricky to visualize, but it's based on the jobs to be done. So if you have one customer segment that has one job to be done, you've got one JTBD thing here. You sign up for a trial, you get them to the activation metrics that foot towards that job to be done thing. Ideally, they've perceived the brand promise. They love you. You wait a few weeks, they're loving you on a daily basis. Now they're evangelists, and you think about how you enable them to make referrals. You might incentivize them, etc.
I would like to say, if you have a product with one job to be done, you're in a very rare scenario because your funnel should be so linear, right? It should be really clear who you're targeting and how they can come in. Like you can have such a money printing product led growth strategy where you don't really need people involved. It's just the machine printing cash itself and generating users itself if the growth engine is built correctly. But like if you're like most SaaS companies, you have multiple jobs to be done. You probably have multiple personas on that team that you have to tailor your messaging to. So something like this is great to map out so you can see, okay, how do we tailor our onboarding experience for everyone that is signing up for that trial? And again, you want to track the KPIs at the end of that to close the feedback loop to understand, hey, are the channels working and generating the right quality of users?
Totally. And I guess you can segment all the way back up here, which is what you want to do. So for us, it's like, all right, we have our outbound, which we could say, or I'm sorry, we have our warm leads, which you definitely want to segment where you can. So it's like, you know, small, medium, large is one, or this outcome, that outcome, that outcome. And then you have cold outbound. So you probably want to be thoughtful of firmographics that go towards that segment. Like, what are the attributes, right? If you're trying to make new friends, it's like, I found out that my friends wear leather jackets, ride motorcycles, and love the NFL. Cool. You want to find those attributes when you start to go make new friends, right? So this isn't very segmented here. And that pushes forward. So as he had commented, right, like the trial sign up is kind of where you start to think about, okay, and these segments can be, the jobs to be done can be the segments. So you can pull this stuff all the way back here where this first lead magnet is a function of the job to be done, number one, which maps to the attributes and the characteristics that identify that customer segment. So just think, you want to be serving up the most relevant stuff always. And to do that, you need to understand your customer segments and, you know, by way of metaphor, the food they like to eat. So like, this group likes Italian, this group likes sushi, this group likes Mexican. Cool. Everything you touch them with is either going to be about Italian, sushi, or Mexican. You don't talk about all the food you make. Okay, cool. And then I guess as we start to layer in some complexity here, we've got Owned, which is the marketing site. So we have website visitors too, because there are folks that find you through SEO or whatever, find you on social, they go right to your website, they sign up for a trial. So you want to contemplate that. And obviously your website conversions need to be solid. Kyle Poirier has some good benchmarks on what those conversion rates look like, but it's like, 4% of your website traffic should be turning into trials. If not, you've got some problems with your messaging on your website, et cetera. So anyway, those feed in. And then, what we haven't lit up yet is paid ads. So paid ads, let's go kind of in order here. So you have Owned. In this case, it's your marketing site, and then you have email. So you have trial nurture emails. And then you also have like everything down here you own basically.
That is your operating surface area.
You own the product. This is all your surface area, right? As you go above that, and ambassadors is a little bit gray because if you're incentivizing ambassadors, they fit more in the paid bucket. But anyway, they're there. And those are, again, folks that are clear that they're helping you spread the word, and they're doing it because they love you so much, or they're doing it because you're paying them, or you're giving their people a discount, whatever the case may be. And so that sits in earned, and then above that you have paid. So paid ads, and then you want to be thoughtful of like, what are you buying ads against? Are you buying at like, hey, this is this thing, you should trial it. And I would just be, I guess, the cheapest thing to pay ads for is something that is content and lead magnets. So that's a much cheaper thing because there's way less ask in the conversion. So it's like, hey, subscribe to our newsletter, or hey, use this free template that's dope as hell and is super useful for you. I would probably start pointing ads at something like that. And then once you work up some courage, you have some good performance there, then maybe you start to point ads to our trial conversion. The bottom line is if you're buying ads, you want them represented here, and you want to understand what you're buying ads against. And that's pretty much it. Oh, the only thing that we didn't touch on as it relates to Evergreen is another way to think about this is you start with short form content. Like if this was a very data-driven approach, you would start with short form content because you can get as many reps as humanly possible with that and see what hits, and then turn the short form into long form content. Yep. So that's a way more kind of data-driven approach, is start with short form where there's much higher velocity, it gives you more surface area to measure performance. And then what slaps, you essentially turn it, you turn it into long form. So these steps here would be resequenced. But that's a little bit of minutia there. All right. Let's talk tech stack, Kev?
Let's talk tech stack.
All right, so let's zoom in just a smidge here. So we've got, for us, long form content, HubSpot is our spinal cord. So we've got their CMS for our blog. As you move from long form to short form, we're using copy.it. Only it's a little TBD, but there's a shitload of shit out there to repurpose. So don't be repurposing your own content.
I was actually going to do the shameless plug for Bywords as the go-to for long form. In all of the research and tooling that we've been looking at over the last few months, Bywords keeps coming up as the number one for long form content. And then, of course, there's a lot of other AI generative tools that can then splinter off the shorter form from there. So you really just need a solid starting point.
Yeah, and I think just there's what's his name? Oh, like the marketing dude. Oh God.
Neil Patel?
Yes, Neil Patel. He just really, so be a little careful of going super hard at generative AI long form because he just released some data, and we know this, right? It's basically taking what's knowledge that's already out there in the world on the internet and regurgitating it. So if you want a real edge on your content game, you need to pull in something that's novel. So just think that like it's got to be on the edge. It's got to be kind of state of the art about your users, how the problems they face, how they're solving their problems. A great way to access that knowledge is to give your users a microphone and step out. But just be thoughtful that you want to have a balance of dope content, and then you want stuff that's more just kind of volume. So anywho,
another addition to that too, like you said, give your users the microphone. We started with our knowledge base. What are users requesting in terms of like support around the platform? Let's generate content around that, get it into our knowledge base. Great. Now let's generate blog posts and studio spotlights around how people are now enabled to use these features more. So that is always a good starting point as well.
Totally. And long form is, I totally didn't represent long form content here, but your knowledge base is a huge source of long form content, and it's hyper relevant. But think that that's, for most part, you want to give prospective users, prospective accounts, confidence that your knowledge base is dope. But that's probably not going to be the thing that gets them to buy the thing. So you want to be considered like, we know the problems that we're solving better than anyone, and we're solving them in the most dope way ever because we've been spending a lot of time on them. That's kind of the main objective. Okay, so to keep it moving here, how are we doing on time? Yeah, okay, cool. We're almost there. So something to repurpose your thing. Figma, we use Figma for creative templates. One thing there that was groundbreaking for us is there's, stock image plugins, and there's generative image plugins here that will really speed up your creative, but you want it to be template based because brands are a function of associations, right? So you want to build recognition around how your stuff is formatted, around the, all the stuff that generates brand recall. Yep. We use Riverside to record our shit and then splinter it up. So any of the snippets you see for Love of the Game, That's a function of Riverside. And then we've got social scheduling. And this is where it kind of gets a little weird because it depends a lot on the platforms that you have lit up. And that's an important caveat too for short form. Make sure that you only itemize, or like the priority is which channels do we have that are active. So if it's more SMB, it's probably going to be Facebook and Instagram. If it's more, kind of B2B, mid-market, large accounts, it's probably LinkedIn and Twitter. But anyway, just be thoughtful of which platforms you're on. And then you want to understand how to schedule that stuff, because we want to group activities as often as we can. So content's a good thing to approach with a sprint methodology, where it's like, we're going to just jam the backlog totally full for the next month so that we're ideating, creating, scheduling, and then we can move on. And then your job then is just to actually engage with your prospects and stuff like that on social, but you're not worried about what you're writing and when it's dropping. And I guess closely related to this is the analytics. So whatever tooling you find, you want to make sure that it gives you incredible analytics so that you can uncover the posts that are doing the best, so you can recycle them with some frequency, and also so you can expand on them with long form content. Gucci?
Yeah, I would add here. So when it comes to short form content and posting a lot of this on social, the tooling around the social platforms, they're a dime a dozen, honestly. And it's going to give you a headache where you're going to find some tools only work with certain platforms, and then this one may only schedule. You have to get another one for analytics. As you start to run into scenarios like that, spend extra time doing your due diligence with a platform that can, if it focuses on Instagram, it does everything you need for Instagram, versus one platform that does, or two platforms that does one thing for Instagram and then two others for LinkedIn. No. If you're going to identify, hey, Instagram is our best performing channel, then find one solution that does everything for that channel. Otherwise, you're just going to start to create more tech debt and headache with just trying to manage all of this stuff.
Yeah, just operational complexity, which is a function of solutions that you have to tether together. That leads to data silos, et cetera. And this sets up really good for a scorecard exercise. So before you just start buying shit, you'd be like, hey, these are the channels that we're on. This is the functionality that we need for each channel. And then go out and vet tooling. And, ideally you find one thing that does it all. But as Kevin just commented, there's so much nuance from platform to platform. I think my point of view right now is you got to optimize per platform. And with that, you got to be super thoughtful when you're adding a new platform, because that comes with its own bag of stuff that you have to tether together and make sure you're all coherent. So, cool.
The one thing I would say to always index for in all of your research, if you do end up with multiple platforms, just make sure they all tie back to your CRM. If it's not in the CRM, it doesn't exist. That's the best way to tether all of your data points around your relationships, because then you can push that data out to the other platforms that are needed, even to ChatGPT to spin up content on how to target and personalize the message to a certain user. But just make sure it all comes back to your CRM. That is the truth of source.
Or customer data platforms are interesting too. Just make sure you have a singular system of record. That's the holy grail, right? Single source of truth, as we used to say back in the day. Okay, so then lead scraping, a lot of action here. You can, just pay an Upworker to go through and manually grab leads. You can buy lead lists. You can do all kinds of stuff. And then we're executing email sequences through HubSpot. Or actually, what are we using? Nova?
Snov, SNOV.io.
Okay, cool. So think about that. Like, that's another one where you might go with something specialized for the email sequences, because there's a lot of nuance there. I think HubSpot does a good job. It'll get you pretty far, but you want to be doing some other stuff there as well. But anyway, and this is mostly related to cold leads.
I would say HubSpot is way more teed up for marketing automation. When it comes down to the sequencing and contacting folks cold, there's the aspect of maintaining domain reputation, so your messages aren't getting sent to spam. There's the aspect of warming up multiple inboxes. So the reason we went with Snub was because it goes through the process of not only enriching the leads that we scraped, but it then tees up campaigns where it's going to warm up our inbox with existing users that we have, who we've already nurtured, and then it's going to tee up cold folks and do it in a manner where we maintain that domain reputation. And it manages all of that for you and reports on the analytics for you, so you can make sure you're doing all the right things and staying safe.
No doubt. So obviously that's just a sneak peek of the kind of complexity that's involved with cold outbound. And the one thing we didn't touch on is DM automation, which kind of fits back into what's your scorecard. But this is like hey, you want the thing? DM, I want the thing. And we'll send it to you. And this is, I would say, a more modern take on inbound, where it used to be like, come to our website. Oh, you want to download the white paper? Give us your email. Like, those tactics are a little played out now. And it has to be a business email or a personal email. Now it's like, just make that loop a little tighter and a little less effort where it's just like DM us, and that's the same as an opt-in of them giving you the email address. So it's a little smoother. Cool. And then we get folks that are in the that have signed up for a trial, knock on wood. And so from here, it's just about the trial base. And for us, it's a 2-week trial. So it's an email sequence that, again, is meant to prompt users to get to this, to execute on the job to be done, whatever that onboarding experience is looking like. And we've spoken a lot about product native, segment-based onboarding experiences. And then that'll get them to the brand promise. Now all of a sudden they love you. And now it's go, baby, go. I think that's it. That's the whole business in 20 minutes.
That's the whole growth engine, baby. One thing I'll add to the DM automation, the nice tactic there with making the loop tighter is essentially you're just targeting everyone that is engaging on your own content, or targeting people who are engaging on the content using the hashtags you're using in your post. So it goes through the hashtags, find those people who are super engaged, and it's like, hey, you look like you're enjoying this stuff. Would you also be interested in bing? Now that's a campaign.
There you go. No doubt. So have fun with this. I think no matter what, even if it's on a whiteboard, even if it's on obviously you want it somewhere where you can socialize with everybody so that you're all aligned. The 2.0 here would be to weave in KPIs. So it's like, for every newsletter, like we need this many subscribers, this many are going to, of this whole chunk here, this many are going to convert to trial signups. And then you can start to back in, mathematically into what kind of volume you need to send through the system to meet your goals. But I would say for now, just keep it simple. Just map the territory that exists so everyone's clear on what's out there and what's flowing. And this has to live somewhere, and it can be crude as shit, but it has to live somewhere, and you got to be able to point everybody towards it so you're clear on what's going. And then from there, you can isolate areas and optimize them accordingly. But this is table stakes. You got to have your growth engine diagrammed, and you got to be clear on it. And hopefully this template helps get y'all there. Cool?
Yeehaw.
All right. Okay, Lou, I'll see you next week, my friend. Always a pleasure sharing the field of battle. Should we do the laser beams? Is it going to work? Oh,
For the love
laser
of the game.
beams, laser beams. All right, buddy. I'll catch you later.
All right. Until next week, for the love of the game.